ignore the mess, please. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today I want to tell you about the books that I read in August. Full disclosure, it is actually the last day of August currently, but I know for a fact that I am not going to finish any other books this month, so I figured let's call it good. This month I have read 5 books. I think this actually might be the month I've read the least books. I don't know, guys. I've been having a problem focusing. I've actually only started focusing within the last couple of weeks or so to finish reading things. Even the last like week and a half. So it's been it's been rough. Anyway, let's get into the books that I actually completed this month. The first thing that I read was Busman's Honeymoon by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is a Lord Peter Whimsy mystery featuring also Harriet Vane. Honestly, haven't read that many books with both of them. I've read Whose Body. I've read Have His Car Case, and I've started Clouds of... I can't remember the rest of the title. So one of those is a Peter Whimsy book. The other is I'm pretty sure he shows up at some point, but is that very heavily Harriet Vane book. And then this is the third completed novel I've read. And honestly, I think I liked this the most out of all of them that I've read so far. Following Lord Peter and his bride, they have had I wouldn't say a sudden marriage, but they finagled a wedding very quickly, which was a fun part of this book at the beginning. And then they have been whisked away to the country to stay in this old estate that they've just acquired, of course, with the dear valet, Bunter. And, you know, they're just settling into their quiet honeymoon, thinking this is going to be a great time, get away from reporters, have some nice time as newlyweds by ourselves, that kind of thing. The only problem is that Bunter then finds the former owner, who kind of left things very messy at the house. The former owner, they find his dead body. He has been murdered. So now this honeymoon has turned into a murder investigation. I really liked this book. I mean, obviously there was a murder to investigate, there were things going on, there was the whole, like I said, the investigation process and everything, a cast of characters that you kind of meet who are the suspects basically. And while that's part of it, the majority of this novel is just featuring the couple in their new life, kind of coming to terms with, hey, we're married now, and like being vulnerable with each other and really being partners, basically, in every sense of the word. So I really kind of enjoyed that. Whimsy is a complicated character in my mind. He's definitely not like Hugh Laurie's like what Bertie Wooster, but yet I always picture his face as Whimsy all the time. That's just who I picture in my head, is basically him, which is not really correct, because whimsy is actually a lot more serious than that. He was in the Great War, so he also is dealing with a lot of survivor's guilt. He has a lot of PTSD, which I think is also something very well done that Dorothy L. Sayers did in here, was to create a character who is dealing with PTSD, or what do they call it back then? Shell shock, I think. But I really like that, how that's handled in here, and that's part of the main character's like personality, and something that he you know, kind of struggles with. I think that kind of fleshes him out in a way. Like, he's a very ridiculous kind of character, but that's almost like a facade that he puts on, even though he has like a very good sense of humor and everything. That the whole ridiculous thing is very much like a facade that he puts on, and that's very that's very interesting too. I really liked their romance. The romance bits, Bunter is always a delight. I love him. And the beginning of this book is also told in like a bunch of letters, which is something that I also very much enjoyed. Things were very funny. I also really liked the innuendos that were throughout here, even though sometimes there's like different quotes and references to things, and I don't know if they are, if you had to be among a certain learned set to understand things at the time, or if it was just common knowledge, the references that they were making. I ended up having to look up things because I had no idea what anyone was talking about. There's a lot of French randomly in here that I also had to look up. I think because of how much I enjoyed the characters and the story overall this go around, it didn't annoy me as much to look up the references. Like, I remember that being something that really frustrated me in Have His Car Case when I read that previously, but I did not mind that really at all when I was reading this. I also really like, yeah, how the characters were with each other and how they were able to be vulnerable with each other. I really enjoyed that, and I think this is an example of when that, I can't remember who he was, but he was like a mystery writer, and he had like these rules of mystery fiction, and basically said that like good mystery fiction, you can't have romance be a part of it at all, and I very much disagree. I think you can, and he can go suck a fuck, actually, and this is an example of vintage mystery, when the romance is, I think, not only an integral part of the story, but also very well done. I really enjoyed this. Let me see. Favorite quotes. So one of them was, so they just arrived at the house, and she says, "Do you like the house, Peter?" And he says, "It's beautiful. It's like a lovely body inhabited by an evil spirit, and I don't mean only the furniture." Yeah, so I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. The next couple of books I read was, I finished my reread of the Percy Jackson series. So I did a reread of The Battle of the Labyrinth, Book 4, and Book 5, The Last Olympian. So these are both very action-packed. Yeah, the both of them are. Battle of the Labyrinth especially. Just right from the get-go, things are happening. The Labyrinth is also very unsettling, kind of interesting. Yeah, this is just a great time from beginning to end. Super action-packed, but still managed to be both funny and emotional. There's like one scene in here that always manages to make me cry, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Also, Nico motherfucking Ghost King D'Angelo. I adore him. And it's not that I forget every time that I adore him, but I am just reminded like tenfold how freaking amazing he is. So yes, I had a good time with this. Let's see, quotes. I wrote down my favorite quote, but the more I'm looking at the quote, I'm thinking that it is actually a spoiler. So even though I know this series has been out for forever, I'm not gonna read my favorite quote from it. Okay. And then book 5, honestly, I think is the best book in the bunch. And on this read, I was thinking, no, I love book 1. Book 1's so good. Book 1's the best. Such a good introduction. But then by the time I got around to like this reread, I flew through it in like, what did I read this in one day? Yeah, I read this in one day. I just loved this, and it goes back to being, I think, the best book in the bunch. I think it wraps things up neatly, but still leaves the opening, like, bits to the Heroes of Olympus and continuation of the rest of, like, the offshoot series. I think it does a very good job with that. I absolutely love the action in here, the emotional bits, and again, Nico is like hands down the best part all over again. I also love the inclusion of a couple of other characters in here that are pretty awesome. I love this book a lot. I love it a lot. I'm very excited about the new series, and I'm hoping that it gets renewed enough times so we can get around to these two in the seasons, because these are probably the best books in the series. So yeah, love it. Okay, I will read my favorite quote from here, because I absolutely adore it. I can't claim to know what you and Percy have been going through all these years, but it sounds like Percy is doing something noble. I wish I had that much courage. I got a lump in my throat. I didn't get compliments that much. I just love it. Both of these were 5-star reads. I didn't even write notes for this one because it's just like an extra little doodad. But it is the companion novel with the series is Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Demigod Files. This is fun. It's just an additional little thing. What I like about this, I like the interviews. So they interview a few of the main characters, and I enjoy that. There's an interview with Connor and Travis Stoll, who are from the Hermes Cabin, interview with Clarice from Ares, interview with Annabeth, Grover, Percy. There's also a nice map in here of the camp. So there's this kind of nice little map of Camp Half-Blood. There's this Annabeth's camp trunk to give you an idea of what, like, people would, like, campers would pack. There's also a crossword puzzle, a word jumble, so like a couple of interactive puzzle things in here. I did not complete them, but yeah, so there's a couple of those things. There's also some basic chart info for some of the Olympian gods. There's also some artwork in here of like characters. Ooh, that fell. That's not good. But what I really love about this, what my favorite parts are that there are 3 short stories included in here. And there is Percy Jackson and the Stolen Chariot, which features Clarice, which was very fun. Percy Jackson and the Bronze Dragon, and that one takes place at camp. And then there's also Percy Jackson and the Sword of Hades, which is a story with Nico and Thalia? Yes, Nico and Thalia. And I really love those short stories. I think they were just added little bonuses to the characters, and also added little things that act as like connecting points with like a couple of things that happen within the Heroes of Olympus, so they're also just really great too. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading this. As far as companion novels go, I mean, it's pretty good. And yeah, I gave this like 5 stars. And then the last book that I read in August was Billy Summers by Stephen King. I know that you guys have probably seen my TBR for September, where I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to, like, maybe I'll get into this in September. Surprise! I managed to finish it before the end of the month. That's really cool, and it's something that I can check off of my list for like my 23 in 2023, because this was one of the books that was on there. So that's good. I think that's the only book I managed to check off in August. So this book, oh man, there's a lot of emotions in this one. I had a lot of emotions while reading this one. Fear, excitement, shock, disgust, anger, happiness, sadness. I really like that Stephen King still has the ability to surprise me, because I totally went into this book expecting exactly what was described, which was a hitman with a kind of heart of gold, as he goes on his last job and things go horribly awry. And while that's very much the case, although Billy would not describe himself as a hitman with a heart of gold, he thinks he's, you know, he like is like, nah, I'm probably not a good person. I've killed people. He is still very like a morally gray kind of character, but it's so much more than just exactly what I was expecting, which is always kind of a good thing with King, to still be kind of surprised by what he comes up with. There is a lot going on in here, and I know that like the beginning parts of this is a little slow. There's some setup happening, and it's also some waiting around, because Billy is waiting around. He's basically establishing himself in an area to wait for the job to happen. So that just means that there's some setup happening, but the setup is kind of important for the rest of the story. And also it gives Billy the opportunity to do some writing. His cover for being in the area, to be able to kill his target. He is a sniper. His cover for being in the area is to be a writer who is holed up trying to finish a deadline. And Billy actually begins writing down his life story and addressing his past. It's a lot. And then things, like I said, the job goes kind of wrong, and he ends up having to like hole up somewhere, and shit happens when another person gets involved. It gets complicated. Yeah, I'd say things get kind of complicated. I'm trying so hard not to like reveal too many things, because I think that part of what is enjoyable about this is kind of peeling the layers back and finding more of the story underneath what you initially think. So I don't really want to like get into too many details, but this is a lot more than what I was expecting. I will say there are some imagery and scenes in here that are a bit disturbing. If you've read King before, I think you'd be pretty used to the incorporation of some of these themes in here, or some of these like situations. There were a couple of scenes and including ways that something was phrased a few times that did have me mentally going like, sir, not really necessary. But for the most part, I did find to be this story to be pretty beautifully done. I will say though, please do check out all of like the trigger warnings before you pick this up, just so like you're aware of them in case you feel like maybe you need to skip it or you just need to like mentally prepare for them. I know there's like some kind of website I think where you can actually look them up. I did not honestly look up to see if that was on here because I can't remember the name of the website, but yeah, if you know what I'm talking about, please do check this out because there are a couple of parts that, I mean, they're upsetting. It's not like profoundly upsetting to me, but they'd probably be things that some people would struggle with a lot. So just be aware of that before you pick it up. But still, I really enjoyed this. Hey, so it is editing Jen of the future. And I just realized when I was talking about my last book read of August, I realized a couple of things. One, that I forgot a couple of books. I DNF'd 2 books in August. And two, that when I talked about Billy Summers, I didn't actually really get into the part of the book that really delighted me. I think I like alluded to it but didn't like really get into it. The thing that I had particularly really liked about it was the writing, and not just like the writing because I enjoy Stephen King's writing. I mean like the way that he basically wrote like almost a love letter to the freeing and magical act of writing itself. Now, I am not a, that's not that's not my occupation. I work in distribution at a small company, and I am not a published author or anything. I hope someday to be, but writing is something that I have always really enjoyed and also has always kind of been a source of both therapeutic, exciting, and also at times frustrating. But there is something very magical, I think, at times with certain projects when you know that something is just going so well and you can see how things are going and how you're just so into it as the words are coming out. And there is something kind of magical about creating your own worlds in words. And there's also, I think, sometimes the act of writing can be very freeing, so the character is finally basically facing and addressing things in his past, in his life, in like his childhood and young adulthood, things that are particularly upsetting and stuff, and he is finally kind of working through all of that by telling his own story. And there's a lot of that as well about like freeing, how freeing that the act of writing can sometimes be. Even if someone will never see this particular writing, it's still like important to get it out. And that was something that I very much like loved about this book, and also very much connected with it as well. I've written so many probably terrible, angsty, weird things, and the majority of them will never see the light of day because it was just writing for the sake of writing for myself in a sense to get things out. And then there's other things that I've written that, like, with some editing, hopefully can go out there into the world and things like that. And in 2019, I won NaNoWriMo. Like, I basically National Novel Writing Month is you try to write 50,000 words on one project in a month, November. And in 2019, I think it was my 6th or 7th year of trying to do it, I completed it. I actually wrote like a couple hundred over 50,000. That in of itself was like an accomplishment, but the whole project itself felt very both magical and freeing. Magical because it felt like I was just with it. I was in the zone. Everything was perfect. I could get my shit done. I had the drive. I had the story. I had like everything. And the freeing part was that took life events and I tweaked them a hell of a lot and then incorporated them within the story, which in of itself was also very freeing because it felt like kind of through the characters I was able to start working on my shit a little bit. And so yeah, Billy Summers hit home a lot with the writing aspect of things and connecting with that. And that is something that I very much enjoyed, and it was also something very much that I like seeing from King, because he's written about writers before, but a lot of the times it's like the bad sides of writing, because writing itself can also be very isolating. You know, you live very much in your own head and you know, you're figuring things out, and it's usually, unless you like are writing something with another person or with a team or whatever, you are the one. You're the one who's handling all of that, so it can be kind of isolating, and I think a lot of the times that's what he's tackled, is like the isolating parts of it, or the dealing with things and then coping through alcohol or drugs instead of dealing with things when you're creating. Descending into madness, that kind of thing, or maybe dealing with fanatical fans of your work, depending on his other books. Of course, I haven't read all of his books to this point. I've read a good chunk of them, but not like most of them, so there could be other examples of more positive writing experiences that I just don't know anything about. But I really liked that Billy Summers also differed in that way, that this is more like, rather than be the downsides of a writer's life or writing and things like that, this was more of like the love letter to writing. So, yeah. It is something that I'm going to kind of sit with for a while, just because there's like some parts that really like got me. And there's also a couple of parts in here that were references to another book that made me really happy. So overall, this was an intense book, and I really enjoyed it. I'll read you, let me see, I have a couple of favorite quotes from here. You can't help how you feel. Feelings are like breathing. They come in and go out. And then another quote, which I did quote on my Instagram, I believe. Did you know that you could sit in front of a screen or a pad of paper and change the world? It doesn't last. The world always comes back, but before it does, it's awesome. It's everything. Because you can have the things the way you want. And yeah, I'm not going to read the rest of that because it's a spoiler. But I really enjoyed this. I did not really an annotation thing, kind of, but not exactly. I basically just went through and I just highlighted quotes that I really liked. So yeah. Anyway, I gave this book 4 stars. So I will very quickly talk about 2 books that I forgot about, the 2 books that I DNF'd in August. The first one I DNF'd pretty early into August. I had been in the mood for, rather than podcasts, trying to listen to audiobooks at work. And that was Beachfront Blues, A Killer Cupcake. I do not remember who the author is. So, the first part of it, the first chapter kind of had me a little bit. It was in a restaurant, a fancy restaurant. It's about a sous chef in a fancy restaurant and having a, she's just hates her job. She's having a terrible time with her shitty ass job, her shitty ass boss, and then also terrible customers. She has a terrible customer interaction and then decides that fuck it, fuck this job, it's not worth it. And she quits. So that's the first chapter. Having been a person who has reached a point with a previous job where I said fuck it and just quit, I was like, alright, girl, I can get behind this. Then we move into the next couple of chapters and my interest in the book just kind of waned down. There was a part of the plot that started feeling like it was just veering off into I want to say like Friends episode territory, which I mean, I can't fully crap on Friends because that is something that I definitely watched and enjoyed at one point, but I also just, that's not really me anymore, and I just didn't, yeah, I was like, this is no longer enjoyable. So I DNF'd that. That was that. And then the other book that I ended up DNFing, which if you watched my tag video and I mentioned one of my answers, you'll know about this already, but I also DNF'd Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I gave this a good college try, guys. I got 2 chapters in, was not liking it, but kept telling myself, yo, you gotta keep going. Okay, you just gotta suspend your disbelief, you gotta keep going. Continued on, made it to chapter 6, and just could not fucking be arsed anymore. Which is kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit disappointing, I guess, because I like dragons. I like books about dragons. I think dragons are pretty fucking cool. I enjoy it when books or shows or movies or whatever have dragons in them. And a magic school, I mean, I love that shit. So it was a bit promising. The amount of hype surrounding it was both made me nervous but hopeful at the same time. Nervous because sometimes when the hype is real it ends up being a letdown, but also kind of excited a little bit, but then I don't know, I was hearing a couple of mixed reviews, and one of my best friends was like so into it. I finally decided, okay, I'll give it a try, and yeah, I just couldn't. It's just, I guess one way to put it is that it's just definitely not my cup of tea particularly. The way, there were a couple of situational things that to me personally did not fully make sense, and this might be just a me thing, but to have a, I don't know, a fantasy world novel, just to have people just like automatically say fuck, and this is coming from me who uses fuck in conversation and on here regularly, just to be immersed in, or trying to be immersed into a fantasy world, and then to have the main character drop like a couple of F-bombs, or use more inventive ish swearing language throughout, just kind of pulled me out of it. I found it very jarring, and I don't know if that's just like a thing that's in fantasy now at all, and I've just been completely out of the loop because I don't usually read like adult or new adult. I'm guessing we're counting this as new adult because there's like sex in here, right? I didn't get to that point. I don't know if that's just like the thing now or whatever, but I personally found that incredibly jarring, and it pulled me out of it, and I was like, what is this? Not that people can't swear in a book, but I just feel like maybe if you're in like a fantasy world, you could at least come up with different ways of expressing things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is just me being too picky. But that was an element of it that just kept pulling me out of it a lot. Not only that, but also the way, what's her name, Violet, and how people talked and interacted and stuff like that. Even though I know this is like a new adult, technically, I believe, and the characters are like 20 and up and stuff like that, they also felt very much like younger. Like it felt almost like 15-year-olds. And that was, I don't really, that to me was also kind of jarring. So yeah, I was going to make myself try to get even further into it, but I could just, as the pages went, felt myself getting grumpier and grumpier, and it started feeling more like an assignment than something that I wanted to actually read. And I didn't want to continue and be more grumpy because I knew that what would make it worse than me DNFing it and trying to be diplomatic about the whole thing would be to force myself to read way more of it or finish it and then just end up hate reading it. So I just figured I'd cut my losses and not. And I kind of feel bad about that. Honestly, I kind of feel very, I don't know, messy about the whole thing, because while recently I have seen a couple of reviews that are negative, for the most part everyone else seems to be really happy about it, very positive, or just completely over the moon for it, and just losing their minds about this book and so excited that the second one's coming out, like, what is it, the end of the year or something. And that also makes me feel kind of weird, because I'm like, is there something wrong with me that I can't, that just didn't work for me, that I just didn't get into it? Am I a judgy bitch that I just can't suspend my disbelief enough to enjoy this stupid book? And I don't know. That, I think, was also part of my reading slump in August that I didn't want to talk about originally, because I was just feeling some type of way this month because of attempting to read this, and then how I felt about it and how I feel about just the everything surrounding it. So yeah, but you know what, it's okay, because not every book is for every person. This did not work for me. I am sure that there are books that, in fact, I know that there are books that are what I consider my all-time favorites ever, and I know they do not work for other people at all. Sorry for adding so much to this wrap-up video. We'll get back to Past Gen. Yeah, this was everything that I read in August. Not really that impressive, I guess, but hey, I think I'm pretty much out of my reading slump now, so that's good, because I have a whole shit ton of things that I need to get through in September, so I can try to really catch up on my 3 in 2023 challenge. Anyway, still, I finished these 5 books, and I enjoyed all of them. This is a really good reading month for me, quality-wise, so, you know, that's worth a lot, too. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here and would like to consider subscribing, please do so, and I will see you in the next video.